Hi everyone. In this video, kind of bonus video I suppose, I'm going to provide information about the two final assignments. I'm using this format to augment the information on eClass in the syllabus in particular, because there's quite a bit to cover and there might be this might be more helpful than an email or lots of back and forth on the forum or whatever. So I hope that it's helpful, but as always, your questions are welcome. I'm going to divide this video into two parts. The first is for the annotated bibliography and synthesis, and the second is for the concept map assignment. And in the description below, you'll find a time sequence so that you'll know, for example, if you don't want to watch the concept map assignment part at this point, you can, or you want to go back to it and you don't want to go through the whole first part, you can look for that, and then you can just find that in the video in the timing thing at the bottom, and that hopefully will be helpful. That's probably as clear as mud, but it's best I can do. Anyway, okay, let's go. The first of the final two assignments, aside from the forums, of course, is the annotated bibliography with synthesis. And as you know, the main components of this assignment are the annotations of 7 articles, only 2 from professional journals. You'll follow the same format for writing them up as you did in part 1. But this time you're going to synthesize, that is, you're going to provide a synthesis in addition to the annotations that will look at the key ideas in relation to one another and your potential research topic, identifying commonalities, differences, that sort of thing. And the reason that this is a very helpful exercise is because essentially that's what you're going to be doing when you do a literature review. When you do the literature review for your research project at the end, this is exactly what you'll do. You'll have looked through a whole bunch of literature, probably way more than 7 articles, and you'll then bring them together around in a kind of thematic way. And I'm going to talk about some ideas for doing just that in just a moment. So don't, if you're thinking, oh my gosh, this sounds complicated, don't panic, because help is on the way. Okay. So I'm going to, you'll see some suggestions for doing the synthesis on an eClass page in Module 5. And I want to look at that right now. So look in Module 5 and you'll find this particular article that I think will be very helpful. Okay, so what you will find is a 5-page article that comes actually from the University Writing Center in, I think it's the University of Prince Edward Island. I could be wrong. At any rate, it doesn't matter. I looked at several of these kinds of helpful articles, and this seemed to me to be the very best because it provides a whole bunch of information that I think will be helpful to all of you. So first of all, it gives you several steps that you can go through in planning your synthesis paper. So just like any other paper that you would write, you need to plan first before you start actually putting pen to paper, so to speak. And of course, it's key on your keyboard to the screen, but nevertheless, same idea. And here you will, they provide several steps that you can go through, including filling out this grid. Now, this is, I think, a fabulous idea, and one that I actually have used since I've looked at this paper. Wish I'd had a long time ago. I've done it in kind of different sorts of ways, but this seems to be the most, I think, efficient and really effective way to do it. So what they've suggested doing is looking at the various authors. So, you'll have 7 of these down the side. And of course, their topic is going to be very different than what you're looking at. But it doesn't matter. The steps are the same. And so in looking at the various papers, you might go through them once and think there's certain themes that keep coming up in certain kinds of ways. The authors may call it something different. You can come up with your own term, but there are themes that seem to be important across all of them. And so in these columns, then you'll start noting what those themes are. And as you're reading, you can even do that if you've got the the thing run off ahead of time, you can just start filling in those categories. And as you're reading, you can, make it big enough that you can scribble in some notes and then go back and refine the information that you put here. Or you can even do it on the computer as you're reading, for that matter, your laptop or whatever. So then this becomes a grid that you can go to in actually, once you've completed all of the steps that they suggest here, and filling the grid is the last one. So then you can go to writing your synthesis paper. They give some really good writing tips here that I think would be good for a whole lot of papers that people write, but with particular emphasis on what you're doing here. And so they first synthesize the literature to be discussed, and they chunk it, and then they describe the literature to be discussed. And so here are some sample topic sentences. They're looking at capital punishment, so which hopefully none of you are looking at, but who knows. Anyway, so here's: much of the literature points out that while capital punishment does not deter crime, most Americans still believe that it does deter crime. So then deterrence is one of the themes that comes up here. So the first highlighted section synthesizes the literature. They've looked at the predominant theme and they've synthesized it here. And then some of the other themes that come out of that dominant theme. Not only does the literature agree that capital punishment does not deter crime, so you're giving a clue to what the literature actually says, but some literature suggests that capital punishment may in fact cause more crime. So the first two highlighted sections synthesize the literature, and the third highlighted section describes the literature. So they're just giving some tips here on what you can be thinking about as you're doing your first go through of your writing. And they give some good tips about using topic sentences in your paragraphs, which is something that's a big point that I like to make as well, that you use your paragraphs to tell your story. And those topic sentences in your paragraphs can be so helpful. And they give some examples related to the topic that they're looking at. And then recognizing this synthesis, and they go through looking at the initial draft of what they put together, and then what you have then is an opportunity to see what they actually do when they revise the synthesis. So improving the synthesis at the paper level and improving the synthesis at the paragraph level, and then you can play around with it if you want to. Now, I wouldn't suggest doing that for this one, but you might, because this is a particular topic, but you might want to actually go to yours and follow the same steps. So I think that this will be something that will be helpful to you in putting together your synthesis paper. Some of you may have other approaches that you use, and that's fine. But if you don't and you're wondering, this is one that I think is really a strong one. Okay, so now that you've actually written your synthesis, you can be asking yourself, what makes a great synthesis? Or even before you write it, I suppose would be a good time to do this. So first of all, these are the kinds of things I'm looking for when I'm marking. Do you identify and build thoughtfully on key ideas across the readings? So I don't want to see, well, in this reading they say this, and in this reading they say this, and in this reading they say this, and you do that for each of the 7 ones, but rather you build your ideas across the 7 or across the 5 of the 7 or whatever it happens to be. So you'll need to consider carefully similarities and differences across the readings. So in 5 readings, they suggest this. However, in 2 readings, they argue that, so you can kind of look at similarities and differences in this way. You'll probably want to use quotes from the various articles as they are key to your analysis. So not just to throw in a quote, but to use that quote to build the construction of your analysis that you're putting together. Because really a synthesis is an analysis of what do these readings say across each of the readings. But what I would caution is don't cherry pick. So in other words, don't just kind of turn the pages quickly and your finger points to something you think, oh, that's a good one, and then you throw it into the article, when the context for the author may suggest quite a different interpretation of what you're using it for. So just be careful that your quote actually has the meaning that you intend for it when you include it in your reading. Organize your information, and this is, I've talked about this a little bit before, using paragraph constructions to lead the readers through your ideas. Your topic sentence, that is your first sentence or two in your paragraph that tell what that paragraph is going to be about. In a way, you should be able to read through your whole paper looking at the topic sentences and know what you've said throughout the paper, because that's how powerful topic sentences can be. They really do kind of create the bones, the strong bones of your analysis. And what that does as well is prevent paragraphs from becoming catch-alls. So, I'm reading along and somebody's got a paragraph that's either two sentences or one sentence, or it's like 3 pages long. That says to me that that person has not thought carefully about what they're saying and how they've organized it, so that ideas build on one another within paragraphs and across paragraphs. So use paragraph constructions to convey your ideas the most effectively. And that's what makes a great synthesis as well. This is a short paper, so you're probably not going to use a lot of headings, but you may want to use very, very few, using them judiciously to, again, guide the reader through transitions between key themes. So rather than having to use a lot of text to do that, you can sometimes use a heading to do the same job, keeping in mind that you still want to have continuity between ideas and that sort of thing. And always include an introduction. Now, it may seem odd that I'm putting that at the end, but in many ways, it doesn't make sense to write an introduction other than kind of a bare bones one to begin with in your first draft, because in some ways you don't really know what you're going to say in a paper until you've actually said it. And you may have a wonderful outline and have a pretty clear idea, but in some ways the writing process itself kind of pushes us in certain kinds of ways. So after you've read the paper, then in that introductory paragraph, you're going to tell the reader what they're going to be reading. What are you going to say initially? In a way, it's kind of a synopsis of the paper. So you can then build that, put it at the beginning of your paper, and of course in the conclusion, you're going to talk about what it is that you've said and what kinds of insights that has brought to you and hopefully to the reader. So, so you've kind of got a beginning, a middle, tell me what you're going to say, tell me what you said you were going to say, and then tell me at the end what you said. So, so that helps the reader move through your paper in a way that is effective and constructive. Okay, some just quick FAQs then. What's the length of the assignment? And this is a question that comes up because in some other course syllabuses, some instructors are much more comfortable using word count. Others are more happy with pages. For me, I find that page numbers make more sense because, there's, I don't know how word counts can be totally accurate per page. They can, of course, you can count them on the computer, but, but pages seem to just be the way we construct things, and I don't know, it makes more sense to me. So, so that's what I use. So use a maximum of 5 pages for your actual annotations. Each one will be about half a page. So you probably won't even need the full 5 pages by the time you factor in space between each one. You're not going to want a whole page, but a space between each one. Then, you and your references, you may end up with that needing that amount of space. And then 3 to 5 pages for your synthesis. So, you've got, and if you don't use all 5 pages for your annotation, you want a little more space for your synthesis, well, you can play around with your spaces that way if you want to. I have no problem with that. Make it sure it's double spaced, 12-point font. Use something like Time Roman, you know, something that's clear and clean and consistent, and I can see it easily. And then use 1-inch margins. Your cover page and references don't count in the page count, so don't worry about that. All right, and I think that that's probably very generous in terms of the space that you'll need for this, so if it's shorter than that, don't worry about that either. Another question, should I separate the annotations on separate pages? And as I might suggest above, no, this just wastes a whole lot of space, so just double space it between, and then continue with your next annotation, and just on a continuous basis through the number of pages that you need. Do grammar and style count? Absolutely they do, because from my perspective, your grammar and the style that you use, and the style is in some ways every bit as or even more important than grammar. I guess they're sort of similar to one another in many ways. They carry your ideas and they make them accessible to the reader. So if I can't get at the ideas, or whoever the reader is can't get at the ideas, then that's a problem, because you're not communicating then effectively to the people who are going to be taking in the ideas that you're communicating in your paper. So absolutely they count. Okay, so let's stop there if you wish to, and I'm going to be moving on next to the concept map assignment. Okay, the concept map assignment is one that will actually be your last assignment for this course, other than the form that's related actually to the concept map assignment in the last module. So again, please make sure you check out the description carefully in the assignments, descriptions, and rubrics section of eClass. And you will notice when you get to the description of this assignment that much of the following information that I'm going to be talking about here is presented there. But I'm going to be adding some pointers in this video that I hope will be helpful, because it's a kind of multi-part sort of assignment in a way. And so I'm just going to walk through those stages. There are various ways that instructors actually choose to do this assignment. So someone else who is teaching this course at the same time may be doing it by meeting in a classroom at U of A and going through everybody doing their presentations that way. Or they may be doing it electronically, and there's a way in which I could do that, and everybody would do their presentations electronically so that everybody could see it at once. And it really comes down to what's possible for the cohort and the instructor. In my case, I'm not in Edmonton, so that leaves the first option out. So a face-to-face afternoon just isn't possible, as you might imagine. And although I could use a digital format for the presentations, from my perspective, and this is something that I've found in talking to students, that means that everyone has to be available at the same time for a significant period of time in order to accommodate everyone doing their presentation. And from my perspective, the difficulty is that afterwards, none of the materials that have just been presented are reviewable, or unless the instructor makes a way for that to happen. So I've chosen this format because it means that you can view the presentations at your leisure, in your pajamas if you want, with a nice coffee beside you or whatever you choose. You can save those that are likely to be useful to you in the future or are of particular interest to you for whatever reason, and you can then review them at any time in the future as you need to when you're thinking about how you're going to approach your research projects and so on, if you have saved them. So, you know, that's the step that you'll have to decide on. You're going to need to save all of this information, but to me, it's well worth it if it will be helpful to you in the long run. The steps that I'm going to go through are listed in the assignment description on eClass, as I mentioned, and they follow on one another in a logical sequence. So it's going to be your responsibility to get to know them and follow through on them, but hopefully this will help. So the first thing is that you are going to check your chapter from Creswell and Guterman. So I'm going to show you exactly how you're going to do that. Okay, so for the first step, you're going to select the chapter. So let's go down to Module 6. And here you will find in Module 6 something that looks like a question mark. So you're going to go to where it says choose the chapter for concept map assignment. And what's going to come up is a list of the various chapters, the names of the chapters from Creswell and Guterman. And all of these chapters look at a particular method that could be used in qualitative or mixed methods quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods research. So you will go through and you will choose one of these. Now these are set so that only a certain number of students can choose that particular one. I think I've set it for 2. So if it's set, it must be set for 3 actually. So if all 3 people, if there are 3 people who have already chosen that one, then you'll not be able to choose that one. It won't let you do it. So you'll have to go to another one and choose it. And if you're last in line to pick these out, if you don't think of it for the next 2 or 3 weeks, then you will have to take whatever is left. But that's okay. Any of those options actually are okay. There may be one that's of particular interest to you, but don't forget you're going to be able to hear somebody else do a presentation about that particular method, and that particular method. And so you'll still be able to get the information, and you may do one that you hadn't thought of before that actually has some really interesting approach, is an interesting approach that you may decide that you would like to choose instead. So there are all kinds of good things that can come out of this, and actually that has happened for some of my students. So it's not a problem at all. You may think that you have a preference, but when you actually get in there, you're going to enjoy, I think, doing any of these. So I wouldn't worry about that at all. So that's how you're going to do it. And you'll see very faintly here a circle. You'll just press that circle, and that will either allow you to get in or not. And then you'll go from there. Okay, so I hope that shows you what to do. So that's found in Module 6. Okay, once you've selected your chapter, then you need to become familiar with that chapter. So think carefully through what that chapter has to say, and then you're going to build a concept map using categories, and they're listed actually in the description for this assignment, that are appropriate. And those categories are actually listed in the syllabus as well. So you'll have lots of places that you can go to for that information. And so you could use the strategies you used for the synthesis, for that matter, and set up a chart if you want to, and fill in the information as you go along. And then begin thinking about how these relate to one another. And then you will develop a concept map using Bubbler. There are various ways in which you can put together a concept map, and they are listed as well with the assignment description. Some people use other electronic methods. So for example, they might actually even use Prezi, for example, which is an excellent one actually, because it's not so linear as PowerPoint, although some methods in PowerPoint can be used, but they tend to be a lot more static. Prezi tends to be a lot more helpful in a lot of ways. Okay, so then you're going to build that, after you've built that concept map, then you're going to think about how you're going to present it. So, and the way you're going to present it is through an audiovisual presentation that you're going to share with your colleagues. And I'm going to talk about how you're going to do that more later, but just keep that in mind. So you're going to prepare that audiovisual presentation. After you've done that, you're going to write a 2 to 3 page reflection on the research approach you've explored in your concept maps that provides, in a narrative form, although you can use a few bullet points if you want to, just for brevity's sake, but the whole thing shouldn't be bullet points. Key information about that approach. So it's kind of a Cliff's Note version of your presentation. And the reason for that is because your colleagues may want to kind of go through it in both a visual format, an auditory format, and then one that they can actually follow line by line. So it sort of meets various learning needs, and it also is a handy resource that they can use later on as well. Page count does not include your cover page, references, concept map, and so on. Got references down there twice. That means references are important. And sorry about that mistake. Post your reflection with an URL. So the URL that you can use to get at it from YouTube or whatever method that you use for access, to access your presentation in the forum. In the title of the post, include your topic, for example, case study. So when somebody is going down the line, because it's going to be one big forum group, you can go down the line and look at the topics that are of most interest to you, and you can look at those first. You might want to go through all of them. It's up to you, but you're going to choose 2 or 3 that you're going to then respond to in the forum. And you'll check out a few or all of the presentations, as I said, and you'll respond on the forum. Okay, so those were the sequential steps for the assignment. Now let's talk a little bit about some of those steps. Here are some possibilities for your presentation, and remembering that it needs to be accessible in an audiovisual format. So you can use Prezi or PowerPoint with sound and save that, and people can access it. From my perspective, this is the least accessible way, because it doesn't always work with every kind of computer, or somebody's looking at it on their iPad or some other smaller format, and it just doesn't work as well. So from my perspective, YouTube or something that you can use from iMovie or whatever, and then save it in an URL format online is much more accessible. So I only offer that as a last-ditch alternative. But you can certainly put together your presentation using Prezi and PowerPoint and then record it. And that's a very good way to go as well. Be sure to have the latest version of whatever it is that you're using, and that it translates well. And by that I mean everybody can access it. iMovie is one that a lot of students use, or something that's similar on other kinds of computers other than Apple's or Macs. You can use what I use for all of my videos, and that's Screencast-O-Matic. You can use a free form of it, or you can pay for it. I pay for it so that I can have editing privileges and that sort of thing. But basically what it does is take a picture of whatever is on your computer screen. And so if you have a computer that also records sound, then you can do it that way. And then you can also download from that onto YouTube, just as I think you can from iMovie. For whatever you're going to use, if you're not already familiar with the technology, take time, set aside time for going through the learning curve if the technology is new to you. And in the case of Screencast-O-Matic, it might be part of a day. I'm not a great techie whiz, but I found it quite easy to use, but it's got lots of bells and whistles, more bells and whistles now. So when I first started using it, it was really, really simple, but now it's a little more complex, but it's still pretty simple. So if you can figure out how to do the grab screen, then you're away. I mean, it really is that simple. And then just using the technology that they have for loading it onto YouTube, which is also very simple. If you have questions, I can probably answer some of them at least. Okay. And then in terms of what the audience needs, is that make sure it's easy to see and hear. Make the URL a live link. So don't post it on YouTube and then make it private and not give anybody, the link or the access code for getting to it. So it has to be a live link that people can get to. Make sure you have a good mic and that your sound is set properly when you're recording, and provide credits for the artwork, quotes, and sources. All of that's important. Now, some of you, when you are doing this assignment, are going to approach it with great dread, others with great glee. I can't help that. But it can be kind of fun as long as you set aside enough time for it. And it's not a terribly busy module, so you should have much of the 2 weeks to, or at least the first week to do it, and into the weekend. There are no marks for technical skills. However, people have to be able to see it. So if you've put together something and nobody can access it, especially including me, but if your colleagues can't access it, then I can't mark it. So make sure that it's accessible. So I can't emphasize that enough. And have some fun with it and get creative. This is an assignment that's a little different than a lot. So just have some fun with it, and make sure you're communicating your ideas well. Some people get freaked out because their voice is on a screen. So do a few practice runs and kind of get used to hearing your voice or talking to a screen, and then just have fun with it. Just like you're standing and talking to a class, and it really is a kind of fun assignment if you approach it that way. So if you have any questions as you go along, please feel free to ask, but I hope that this has gone through enough of the detail, maybe in an excruciating detail, I'm not sure, to at least answer a lot of your questions and to kind of get you primed for thinking through what it is that you're going to be doing in each of these assignments. So have fun with it and take care. Yikes.